Lesson 7. Enthusiasm. -3. I gave a beggar a D1 with the suggestion that he invested in a copy of Elbert Hubbard's message to Garcia. -4. The law of success. Lesson 7. Enthusiasm. You can do it if you believe you can. Enthusiasm is a state of mind that inspires and arouses one to put action into the task at hand. It does more than this, it is contagious, and vitally affects not only the enthusiast, but all with whom he comes in contact. Enthusiasm bears the same relationship to a human being that steam does to the locomotive. It is the vital moving force that impels action. The greatest leaders of men are those who know how to inspire enthusiasm in their followers. Enthusiasm is the most important factor entering into salesmanship. It is, by far, the most vital factor that enters into public speaking. If you wish to understand the difference between a man who is enthusiastic and one who is not, compare Billy Sunday with the average man of his profession. The finest sermon ever delivered would fall upon deaf ears if it were not backed with enthusiasm by the speaker. -5. How enthusiasm will affect you. Mix enthusiasm with your work and it will not seem hard or monotonous. Enthusiasm will so energize your entire body that you can get along with less than half the usual amount of sleep, and at the same time it will enable you to perform from 2 to 3 times as much work as you usually perform in a given period, without fatigue. For many years I have done most of my writing at night. One night, while I was enthusiastically at work over my typewriter, I looked out of the window of my study, just across the square from the Metropolitan Tower, in New York City, and saw what seemed to be the most peculiar reflection of the moon on the tower. It was of a silvery gray shade, such as I had never seen before. Upon closer inspection I found that the reflection was that of the early morning sun and not that of the moon. It was daylight. I had been at work all night, but I was so engrossed in my work that the night had passed as though it were but an hour. I worked at my task all that day and all the following night without stopping, except for a small amount of light food. 2 nights and 1 day without sleep, and with but little food, without the slightest evidence of fatigue, would not have been possible had I not kept my body energized with enthusiasm over the work at hand. Enthusiasm is not merely a figure of speech, it is a vital force that you can harness and use with profit. Without it you would resemble an electric battery without electricity. -6. Enthusiasm is the vital force with which you recharge your body and develop a dynamic personality. Some people are blessed with natural enthusiasm, while others must acquire it. The procedure through which it may be developed is simple. It begins by the doing of the work or rendering of the service which one likes best. If you should be so situated that you cannot conveniently engage in the work which you like best, for the time being, then you can proceed along another line very effectively by adopting a definite chief aim that contemplates your engaging in that particular work at some future time. Lack of capital and many other circumstances over which you have no immediate control may force you to engage in work which you do not like, but no one can stop you from determining in your own mind what your definite chief aim in life shall be, nor can anyone stop you from planning ways and means for translating this aim into reality, nor can anyone stop you from mixing enthusiasm with your plans. Happiness, the final object of all human effort, is a state of mind that can be maintained only through the hope of future achievement. Happiness lies always in the future and never in the past. The happy person is the one who dreams of heights of achievement that are yet unattained. The home you intend to own, the money you intend to earn and place in the bank, the trip you intend to take when you can afford it, the position in life you intend to fill when you have prepared yourself, and the preparation itself, these are the things that produce happiness. Likewise, these are the materials out of which your definite chief aim is formed, these are the things over which you may. -7. Become enthusiastic, no matter what your present station in life may be. More than 20 years ago I became enthusiastic over an idea. When the idea first took form in my mind I was unprepared to take even the first step toward its transformation into reality. But I nursed it in my mind. I became enthusiastic over it as I looked ahead, in my imagination, and saw the time when I would be prepared to make it a reality. The idea was this: I wanted to become the editor of a magazine, based upon the golden rule, through which I could inspire people to keep up courage and deal with one another squarely. Finally my chance came. And, on Armistice Day, 1918, I wrote the first editorial for what was to become the material realization of a hope that had lain dormant in my mind for nearly a score of years. With enthusiasm I poured into that editorial the emotions which I had been developing in my heart over a period of more than 20 years. My dream had come true. My editorship of a national magazine had become a reality. As I have stated, this editorial was written with enthusiasm. I took it to a man of my acquaintance and with enthusiasm I read it to him. The editorial ended in these words: "At last my 20-year-old dream is about to come true. It takes money, and a lot of it, to publish a national magazine, and I haven't the slightest idea where I am going to get this essential factor, but this is worrying me not at all because I know I am going to get it somewhere." As I wrote those lines, I mixed enthusiasm and faith with them. I had hardly finished reading this editorial when. -8. The man to whom I read it, the first and only person to whom I had shown it, said, "I can tell you where you are going to get the money, for I am going to supply it." And he did. Yes, enthusiasm is a vital force, so vital, in fact, that no man who has it highly developed can begin even to approximate his power of achievement. Before passing to the next step in this lesson, I wish to repeat and to emphasize the fact that you may develop enthusiasm over your definite chief aim in life, no matter whether you are in position to achieve that purpose at this time or not. You may be a long way from realization of your definite chief aim, but if you will kindle the fire of enthusiasm in your heart, and keep it burning, before very long the obstacles that now stand in the way of your attainment of that purpose will melt away as if by the force of magic, and you will find yourself in possession of power that you did not know you possessed. How your enthusiasm will affect others. We come, now, to the discussion of one of the most important subjects of this reading course, namely, suggestion. In the preceding lessons we have discussed the subject of autosuggestion, which is self-suggestion. You saw, in lesson 3, what an important part autosuggestion played. Suggestion is the principle through which your words and your acts and even your state of mind. -9. One of the least valuable things any alum can learn is the art of using the knowledge and experience of others. Influence others. That you may comprehend the far-reaching power of suggestion, let me refer to the introductory lesson, in which the principle of telepathy is described. If you now understand and accept the principle of telepathy, the communication of thought from one mind to another without the aid of signs, symbols, or sounds, as a reality, you of course understand why enthusiasm is contagious, and why it influences all within its radius. When your own mind is vibrating at a high rate, because it has been stimulated with enthusiasm, that vibration registers in the minds of all within its radius, and especially in the minds of those with whom you come in close contact. When a public speaker senses the feeling that his audience is en rapport with him, he merely recognizes the fact that his own enthusiasm has influenced the minds of his listeners until their minds are vibrating in harmony with his own. When the salesman senses the fact that the psychological moment for closing a sale has arrived, he merely feels the effect of his own enthusiasm as it influences the mind of his prospective buyer and places that mind and rapport in harmony with his own. The subject of suggestion constitutes so vitally an important part of this lesson, and of this entire course, that I will now proceed to describe the three mediums through which it usually operates, namely, what you say, what you do and what you think. When you are enthusiastic over the goods you are selling or the services you are offering, or the speech you are delivering, your state of mind becomes obvious to all who hear you, by the tone of your voice. Whether you have ever thought of it in this way or -11. Not, it is the tone in which you make a statement, more than it is the statement itself, that carries conviction or fails to convince. No mere combination of words can ever take the place of a deep belief in a statement that is expressed with burning enthusiasm. Words are but devitalized sounds unless colored with feeling that is born of enthusiasm. Here the printed word fails me, for I can never express with mere type and paper the difference between words that fall from unemotional lips, without the fire of enthusiasm back of them, and those which seem to pour forth from a heart that is bursting with eagerness for expression. The difference is there, however. Thus, what you say, and the way in which you say it, conveys a meaning that may be just the opposite to what is intended. This accounts for many a failure by the salesman who presents his arguments in words which seem logical enough, but lack the coloring that can come only from enthusiasm that is born of sincerity and belief in the goods he is trying to sell. His words said one thing, but the tone of his voice suggested something entirely different, therefore, no sale was made. That which you say is an important factor in the operation of the principle of suggestion, but not nearly so important as that which you do. Your acts will count for more than your words, and woe unto you if the two fail to harmonize. If a man preach the golden rule as a sound rule of conduct, his words will fall upon deaf ears if he does not practice that which he preaches. The most effective sermon that any man can preach on the soundness of the golden rule is that which he -12 preaches, by suggestion, when he applies this rule in his relationships with his fellow men. If a salesman of Ford automobiles drives up to his prospective purchaser in a Buick, or some other make of car, all the arguments he can present in behalf of the Ford will be without effect. Once I went into one of the offices of the dictaphone company to look at a dictating machine. The salesman one in charge presented a logical argument as to the machine's merits, while the stenographer at his side was transcribing letters from a shorthand notebook. His arguments in favor of a dictating machine, as compared with the old method of dictating to a stenographer, did not impress me, because his actions were not in harmony with his words. Your thoughts constitute the most important of the three ways in which you apply the principle of suggestion, for the reason that they control the tone of your words and, to some extent at least, your actions. If your thoughts and your actions and your words harmonize, you are bound to influence those with whom you come in contact, more or less toward your way of thinking. We will now proceed to analyze the subject of suggestion and to show you exactly how to apply the principle upon which it operates. As we have already seen, suggestion differs from autosuggestion only in one way: we use it, consciously or unconsciously, when we influence others, while we use autosuggestion as a means of influencing ourselves. Before you can influence another person through suggestion, that person's mind must be in a state of neutrality, that is, it must be open and receptive to -13. Your method of suggestion. Right here is where most salesmen fail. They try to make a sale before the mind of the prospective buyer has been rendered receptive or neutralized. This is such a vital point in this lesson that I feel impelled to dwell upon it until there can be no doubt that you understand the principle that I am describing. When I say that the salesman must neutralize the mind of his prospective purchaser before a sale can be made, I mean that the prospective purchaser's mind must be credulous. A state of confidence must have been established, and it is obvious that there can be no set rule for either establishing confidence or neutralizing the mind to a state of openness. Here the ingenuity of the salesman must supply that which cannot be set down as a hard and fast rule. I know a life insurance salesman who sells nothing but large policies, amounting to $100,000 and upward. Before this man even approaches the subject of insurance with a prospective client, he familiarizes himself with the prospective client's complete history, including his education, his financial status, his eccentricities if he has any, his religious preferences, and other data too numerous to be listed. Armed with this information, he manages to secure an introduction under conditions which permit him to know the prospective client in a social as well as a business way. Nothing is said about the sale of life insurance during his first visit, nor his second, and sometimes he does not approach the subject of insurance until he has become very well acquainted with the prospective client. All this time, however, he is not dissipating his efforts. He is taking advantage of these friendly visits. -14. For the purpose of neutralizing his prospective client's mind, that is, he is building up a relationship of confidence so that when the time comes for him to talk life insurance, that which he says will fall upon ears that willingly listen. Some years ago I wrote a book entitled How to Sell Your Services. Just before the manuscript went to the publisher, it occurred to me to request some of the well-known men of the United States to write letters of endorsement to be published in the book. The printer was then waiting for the manuscript, therefore, I hurriedly wrote a letter to some 8 or 10 men, in which I briefly outlined exactly what I wanted, but the letter brought back no replies. I had failed to observe 2 important prerequisites for success. I had written the letter so hurriedly that I had failed to inject the spirit of enthusiasm into it, and I had neglected so to word the letter that it had the effect of neutralizing the minds of those to whom it was sent. Therefore, I had not paved the way for the application of the principle of suggestion. After I discovered my mistake, I then wrote a letter that was based upon strict application of the principle of suggestion, and this letter not only brought back replies from all to whom it was sent, but many of the replies were masterpieces and served, far beyond my fondest hopes, as valuable supplements to the book. For the purpose of comparison, to show you how the principle of suggestion may be used in writing a letter, and what an important part enthusiasm plays in giving the written word flesh, the 2 letters are here reproduced. It will not be necessary to indicate which letter failed, as that will be quite obvious. -15. A careful inventory of all your past experiences may disclose the startling fact that everything has happened for the best. -16. My dear Mr. Ford, I am just completing a manuscript for a new book entitled How to Sell Your Services. I anticipate the sale of several 100,000 of these books, and I believe those who purchase the book would welcome the opportunity of receiving a message from you as to the best method of marketing personal services. Would you, therefore, be good enough to give me a few minutes of your time by writing a brief message to be published in my book? This will be a big favor to me personally, and I know it would be appreciated by the readers of the book. Thanking you in advance for any consideration you may care to show me, I am, yours very truly, Honorable Thomas R. Marshall, Vice President of the United States, Washington, D.C. My dear Mr. Marshall, would you care for the opportunity to send a message of encouragement, and possibly a word of advice, to a few 100,000 of your fellow men who have failed to make their mark in the world as successfully as you have done? I have about completed a manuscript for a book to be entitled How to Sell Your Services. The main point made in the book is that service rendered is cause and the pay envelope is effect, and that the latter varies in proportion to the efficiency of the former. The book would be incomplete without a few. -17. Words of advice from a few men who, like yourself, have come up from the bottom to enviable positions in the world. Therefore, if you will write me of your views as to the most essential points to be borne in mind by those who are offering personal services for sale, I will pass your message on through my book, which will ensure it's getting into hands where it will do a world of good for a class of earnest people who are struggling to find their places in the world's work. I know you are a busy man, Mr. Marshall, but please bear in mind that by simply calling in your secretary and dictating a brief letter you will be sending forth an important message to possibly 500,000 people. In money this will not be worth to you the 2-cent stamp that you will place on the letter, but, if estimated from the viewpoint of the good it may do others who are less fortunate than yourself, it one may be worth the difference between success and failure to many a worthy person who will read your message, believe in it, and be guided by it. Very cordially yours. Now, let us analyze the two letters and find out why one failed in its mission while the other succeeded. This analysis should start with one of the most important fundamentals of salesmanship, namely motive. In the first letter it is obvious that the motive is entirely one of self-interest. The letter states exactly what is wanted, but the wording of it leaves a doubt as to why the request is made or whom it is intended to benefit. Study the sentence in the second paragraph, this will be a big favor to me personally, etc. Now it may seem to be a peculiar trait, but the -18. Truth is that most people will not grant favors just to please others. If I ask you to render a service that will benefit me, without bringing you some corresponding advantage, you will not show much enthusiasm in granting that favor. You may refuse altogether if you have a plausible excuse for refusing. But if I ask you to render a service that will benefit a third person, even though the service must be rendered through me, and if that service is of such a nature that it is likely to reflect credit on you, the chances are that you will render the service willingly. We see the psychology demonstrated by the man who pitches a dime to the beggar on the street, or perhaps refuses even the dime, but willingly hands over $100 or $1,000 to the charity worker who is begging in the name of others. But the most damaging suggestion of all is contained in the last and most important paragraph of the letter, thanking you in advance for any consideration you may care to show me. This sentence strongly suggests that the writer of the letter anticipates a refusal of his request. It clearly indicates lack of enthusiasm. It paves the way for a refusal of the request. There is not one single word in the entire letter that places in the mind of a man to whom it is sent a satisfactory reason why he should comply with the request. On the other hand, he can clearly see that the object of the letter is to secure from him a letter of endorsement that will help sell the book. The most important selling argument, in fact, the only selling argument available in connection with this request, has been lost because it was not brought out and established as the real motive for making the request. -19. This argument was but faintly mentioned in the sentence. I believe those who purchase the book would welcome the opportunity of receiving a message from you as to the best method of marketing personal services. The opening paragraph of the letter violates an important fundamental of salesmanship because it clearly suggests that the object of the letter is to gain some advantage for its writer, and does not even hint at any corresponding advantage that may accrue to the person to whom it is sent. Instead of neutralizing the mind of the recipient of the letter, as it should do, it has just the opposite effect. It causes him to close his mind against all argument that follows. It puts him in a frame of mind that makes it easy for him to say no. It reminds me of a salesman, or, perhaps I should say, a man who wanted to be a salesman who once approached one Annie for the purpose of selling me a subscription to the Saturday Evening Post. As he held a copy of the magazine in front of me, he suggested the answer I should make by this question. You wouldn't subscribe for the Post to help me out, would you? Of course I said no. He had made it easy for me to say no. There was no enthusiasm back of his words, and gloom and discouragement were written all over his face. He needed the commission he would have made on my subscription had I purchased, no doubt about that, but he suggested nothing that appealed to my self-interest motive, therefore he lost a sale. But the loss of this one sale was not the sad part of his misfortune. The sad part was that the same attitude was causing him to lose all other sales which he might have made had he changed his approach. -20. A few weeks later another subscription agent approached me. She was selling a combination of 6 magazines, one of which was the Saturday Evening Post, but how different was her approach. She glanced at my library table, on which she saw several magazines, then at my bookshelves, and exclaimed with enthusiasm, "Oh, I see you are a lover of books and magazines." I proudly pleaded guilty to the charge. Observe the word proudly, for it has an important bearing on this incident. I laid down the manuscript that I was reading when the saleswoman came in, for I could see that she was a woman of intelligence. Just how I came to see this I will leave to your imagination. The important point is that I laid down the manuscript and actually felt myself wanting to hear what she had to say. With the aid of 11 words, plus a pleasant smile, plus a tone of genuine enthusiasm, she had neutralized my mind sufficiently to make me want to hear her. She had performed her most difficult task, with those few words, because I had made up my mind when she was announced that I would keep my manuscript in my hands and thereby convey to her mind, as politely as I could, the fact that I was busy and did not wish to be detained. Being a student of salesmanship and of suggestion, I carefully watched to see what her next move would be. She had a bundle of magazines under her arm and I expected she would unroll it and begin to urge me to purchase, but she didn't. You will recall that I said she was selling a combination of 6 magazines, not merely trying to sell them. -21. First impressions really do count. Dress to look the part you intend to play in life, but take care not to overdo it. -22. She walked over to my bookshelves, pulled out a copy of Emerson's essays, and for the next 10 minutes she talked about Emerson's essay on compensation so interestingly that I lost sight of the roll of magazines that she carried. She was neutralizing my mind some more. Incidentally, she gave me a sufficient number of new ideas about Emerson's works to provide material for an excellent editorial. Then she asked me which magazines I received regularly, and after I told her she smiled as she began to unroll her bundle of magazines and laid them on the table in front of me. She analyzed her magazines one by one, and explained just why I should have each of them. The Saturday Evening Post would bring me the cleanest fiction, Literary Digest would bring me the news of the world in condensed form, such as a busy man like myself would demand, the American Magazine would bring me the latest biographies of the men who were leading in business and industry, and so on, until she had covered the entire list. But I was not responding to her argument as freely as she thought I should have, so she slipped me this gentle suggestion. A man of your position is bound to be well informed and, if he isn't, it will show up in his own work. She spoke the truth. Her remark was both a compliment and a gentle reprimand. She made me feel somewhat sheepish because she had taken inventory of my reading matter and 6 of the leading magazines were not on my list. The 6 that she was selling. -23. Then I began to slip by asking her how much the 6 magazines would cost. She put on the finishing touches of a well-presented sales talk by this tactful reply, "The cost? Why, the cost of the entire number is less than you receive for a single page of the typewritten manuscript that you had in your hands when I came in. Again she spoke the truth. And how did she happen to guess so well what I was getting for my manuscript? The answer is, she didn't guess, she knew. She made it a part of her business to draw me out tactfully as to the nature of my work, which in no way made me angry. She became so deeply interested in the manuscript which I had laid down when she came in, that she actually induced me to talk about it. I am no saying, of course, that this required any great amount of skill or coaxing, for have I not said that it was my manuscript? In my remarks about that manuscript, I suspect I admitted that I was receiving $250 for the 15 pages. Yes, I am sure I was careless enough to admit that I was being well paid for my work. Perhaps she induced me to make the admission. At any rate, the information was valuable to her and she made effective use of it at the psychological moment. For all I know, it was a part of her plan to observe carefully all that she saw and heard, with the object of finding out just what my weaknesses were and what I was most interested in discussing. Some salesmen take the time to do this, some do not. She was one of those who did. Yes, she went away with my order for the 6 magazines, also my $12. But that was not all the benefit she derived from tactful suggestion. -24. Plus enthusiasm, she got my consent to canvass my office, and before she left she had 5 other orders from my employees. At no time during her stay did she leave the impression that I was favoring her by purchasing her magazines. Just to the contrary, she distinctly impressed me with the feeling that she was rendering me a favor. This was tactful suggestion. Before we get away from this incident, I wish to make an admission. When she drew me into conversation she did it in such a way that I talked with enthusiasm. There were 2 reasons for this. She was one of them, and the other one was the fact that she managed to get me to talk about my own work. Of course I am not suggesting that you should be meddlesome enough to smile at my carelessness as you read this, or that you should gather from this incident the impression that this tactful saleswoman actually led me to talk of my own work for the purpose of neutralizing my mind so that I would listen to her, when she was ready to talk of her magazines, as patiently as she had listened to me. However, if you should be clever enough to draw a lesson from her method, there is no way for me to stop you from doing so. As I have stated, when I talked I mixed enthusiasm with my conversation. Perhaps I caught the spirit of enthusiasm from this clever saleswoman, when she made that opening remark as she came into my study. Yes, I am sure this is where I caught it, and I am just as sure that her enthusiasm was not a matter of accident. She had trained herself to look for something in her prospective purchaser's office, or his -25 work, or his conversation, over which she could express enthusiasm. Remember, suggestion and enthusiasm go hand in hand. I can remember, as though it were yesterday, the feeling that came over me when that would-be salesman pushed that Saturday Evening Post in front of me, as he remarked, "You wouldn't subscribe for the Post to help me out, would you?" His words were chilled, they were lifeless, they lacked enthusiasm, they registered an impression in my mind, but that impression was one of coldness. I wanted to see the man go out at the door at which he had come in. Mind you, I am not naturally unsympathetic, but the tone of his voice, the look on his face, his general bearing suggested that he was there to ask a favor and not to offer one. Suggestion is one of the most subtle and powerful principles of psychology. You are making use of it in all that you do and say and think, but, unless you understand the difference between negative suggestion and positive suggestion, you may be using it in such a way that it is bringing you defeat instead of success. Science has established the fact that through the negative use of suggestion life may be extinguished. Some years ago, in France, a criminal was condemned to death, but before the time for his execution an experiment was performed on him which conclusively proved that through the principle of suggestion death could be produced. The criminal was brought to the guillotine and his head was placed under the knife, after he had been blindfolded. A heavy, sharp-edged -26 plank was then dropped on his neck, producing a shock similar to that of a sharp-edged knife. Warm water was then gently poured on his neck and allowed to trickle slowly down his spine, to imitate the flow of warm blood. In 7 minutes the doctors pronounced the man dead. His imagination, through the principle of suggestion, had actually turned the sharp-edged plank into a guillotine blade and stopped his heart from beating. In the little town where I was raised, there lived an old lady who constantly complained that she feared death from cancer. During her childhood she had seen a woman who had cancer and the sight had so impressed itself upon her mind that she began to look for the symptoms of cancer in her own body. She was sure that every little ache and pain was the beginning of her long-looked-for symptom of cancer. I have seen her place her hand on her breast and have heard her exclaim, "Oh, I am sure I have a cancer growing here. I can feel it." When complaining of this imaginary disease, she always placed her hand on her left breast, where she believed the cancer was attacking her. For more than 20 years she kept this up. A few weeks ago she died with cancer on her left breast. If suggestion will actually turn the edge of a plank into a guillotine blade and transform healthy body cells into parasites out of which cancer will develop, can you not imagine what it will do in destroying disease germs, if properly directed? Suggestion is the law through which mental healers work what appear to be miracles. I have personally witnessed the removal of parasitical growths known as -27. Half the wrecks that strew life's ocean. If some star had been their guide, might in safety now be riding. But they drifted with the tide. -28. Warts, through the aid of suggestion, within 48 hours. You the reader of this lesson can be sent to bed with imaginary sickness of the worst sort, in 2 hours' time or less, through the use of suggestion. If you should start down the street and 3 or 4 people in whom you had confidence should meet you and each exclaim that you look ill, you would be ready for a doctor. This brings to mind an experience that I once had with a life insurance salesman. I had made application for a policy, but was undecided as to whether I would take $10,000 or $20,000. Meanwhile, the agent had sent me to the life insurance company's doctor to be examined. The following day I was called back for another examination. The second time the examination was more searching, and the doctor carried a worried look on his face. The third day I was called back again, and this time 2 consulting physicians were there to look me over. They gave me the most searching examination I had ever received or even heard of. The next day the agent called on me and addressed me as follows. "I do not wish to alarm you, but the doctors who examined you do not agree on your analysis. You have not yet decided whether you will take $10,000 or $20,000 worth of insurance, and I do not think it fair for me to give you a report on your medical examination until you make this decision, because if I did you might feel that I was urging you to take the larger amount." Then I spoke up and said, "Well, I have already decided to take the full amount." True enough, I had decided to take the full $20,000 policy. -29. I decided the moment the agent planted the suggestion in my mind that perhaps I had some constitutional weakness that would make it hard for me to get as much insurance as I wanted. Very well, said the agent. Now that you have decided, I feel it my duty to tell you that 2 of the doctors believe you have the tubercular germ in your system, while the other 2 disagree with them. The trick had been turned. Clever suggestion had pushed one Annie over the fence of indecision, and we were all satisfied. Where does enthusiasm come in, do you ask? Never mind, it came in all right, but if you wish to know who brought it, you will have to ask the life insurance agent and his 4 medical accomplices, for I am sure they must have had a hearty laugh at my expense. But the trick was all right. I needed the insurance anyway. Of course, if you happen to be a life insurance agent, you will not grab this idea and work it out on the next prospective client who is slow in making up his mind about taking a policy. Of course you will not. A few months ago I received one of the most effective pieces of advertising I ever saw. It was a neat little book in which a clever automobile insurance salesman had reprinted press dispatches that he had gathered from all over the country, in which it was shown that 65 automobiles had been stolen in a single day. On the back page of the book was this highly suggestive statement. Your car may be the next one to go. Is it insured? At the bottom of the page was the salesman's name and address, also his telephone number. Before I had -30 finished reading the first 2 pages of the book, called the salesman on the telephone and made inquiry about rates. He came right over to see me, and you know the remainder of the story. Go back, now, to the 2 letters and let us analyze the second one, which brought the desired replies from all to whom it was sent. Study, carefully, the first paragraph, and you will observe that it asks a question which can be answered in but one way. Compare this opening paragraph with that of the first letter, by asking yourself which of the 2 would have impressed you most favorably. This paragraph is worded as it is for a twofold purpose. First, it is intended to serve the purpose of neutralizing the mind of the reader so he will read the remainder of the letter in an open-minded attitude, and, second, it asks a question which can be answered in but one way, for the purpose of committing the reader to a viewpoint which harmonizes with the nature of the service that he is to be requested to render. 1 and subsequent paragraphs of the letter. In the second lesson of this course you observed that Andrew Carnegie refused to answer my question, when I asked him to what he attributed his success, until he had asked me to define the word success. He did this to avoid misunderstanding. The first paragraph of the letter we are analyzing is so worded that it states the object of the letter and at the same time practically forces the reader to accept that object as being sound and reasonable. Any person who would answer the question asked. -31. In this paragraph of the letter under discussion, in the negative, would, by the same answer, convict himself on the charge of selfishness, and no man wants to face himself with a guilty conscience on such a charge. Just as the farmer first plows his ground, then fertilizes it, and perhaps harrows it and prepares it to receive the seed, in order that he may be sure of a crop, so does this paragraph fertilize the mind of the reader and prepare it for the seed which is to be placed there through the subtle suggestion that the paragraph contains. Study, carefully, the second paragraph of the letter, and you will observe that it carries a statement of fact which the reader can neither question nor deny. It provides him with no reason for argument because it is obviously based upon a sound fundamental. It takes him the second step of the psychological journey that leads straight toward compliance with the request that is carefully clothed and covered up in the third paragraph of the letter, but you will notice that the third paragraph begins by paying the reader a nice little compliment that was not designed to make him angry. Therefore, if you will write me of your views as to the most essential points to be borne in mind by those who are offering personal services for sale, etc., study the wording of the sentence, together with the setting in which it has been placed, and you will observe that it hardly appears to be a request at all, and certainly there is nothing about it to suggest that the writer of the letter is requesting a favor for his personal benefit. At most, it can be construed merely as a request for a favor for others. Now study the closing paragraph and notice how. -32. Tactfully concealed is the suggestion that if the reader should refuse the request, he is placing himself in the awkward position of one who does not care enough about those who are less fortunate than himself to spend a 2-cent stamp and a few minutes of time for their benefit. From start to finish the letter conveys its strongest impressions by mere suggestion, yet this suggestion is so carefully covered that it is not obvious except upon careful analysis of the entire letter. The whole construction of the letter is such that if the reader lays it aside without complying with the request it makes, he will have to reckon with his own conscience. This effect is intensified by the last sentence of the last paragraph, and especially by the last 13 words of that sentence: who will read your message, believe in it, and be guided by it. This letter brings the reader up with a bang and turns his own conscience into an ally of the writer. It corners him, just as a hunter might corner a rabbit by driving it into a carefully prepared net. The best evidence that this analysis is correct is the fact that the letter brought replies from every person to whom it was sent, despite the fact that every one of these men was of the type that we speak of as being a man of affairs, the type that is generally supposed to be too busy to answer a letter of this nature. Not only did the letter bring the desired replies, but the men to whom it was sent replied in person, with the exception of the late Theodore Roosevelt, who replied under the signature of a secretary. John Wanamaker and Frank A. Vanderlip wrote 2 of the finest letters I have ever read, each a moss. 33. Conceit is a fog which envelopes a man's real character beyond his own recognition. It weakens his native ability and strengthens all his inconsistencies. -34. Terpiece that might well have adorned the pages of a more dignified volume than the one for which the letters were requested. Andrew Carnegie also wrote a letter that was well worth consideration by all who have personal services for sale. William Jennings Bryan wrote a fine letter, as did, also, the late Lord Northcliffe. None of these men wrote merely to please me, for I was unknown to all of them, with the exception of 4. They did not write to please me, they wrote to please themselves and to render a worthy service. Perhaps the wording of the letter had something to do with this, but, as to that, I make no point other than to state that all of these men whom I have mentioned, and most others of their type, are generally the most willing men to render service for others when they are properly approached. I wish to take advantage of this appropriate opportunity to state that all of the really big men whom I have had the pleasure of knowing have been the most willing and courteous men of my acquaintance when it came to rendering service that was of benefit to others. Perhaps that was one reason why they were really big men. The human mind was a marvelous piece of machinery. One of its outstanding characteristics is noticed in the fact that all impressions which reach it, either through outside suggestion or autosuggestion, are recorded together in groups which harmonize in nature. The negative impressions are stored away, all in one portion of the brain, while the positive impressions are stored in another portion. When one of these impressions, or past experiences, is called into the conscious mind, through the principle of -35. Memory, there is a tendency to recall with it all others of a similar nature, just as the raising of one link of a chain brings up other links with it. For example, anything that causes a feeling of doubt to arise in a person's mind is sufficient to call forth all of his experiences which caused him to become doubtful. If a man is asked by a stranger to cash a check, immediately he remembers having cashed checks that were not good, or of having heard of others who did so. Through the law of association, all similar emotions, experiences, and sense impressions that reach the mind are filed away together, so that the recalling of one has a tendency to bring back to memory all the others. To arouse a feeling of distrust in a person's mind has a tendency to bring to the surface every doubt-building experience that person ever had. For this reason, successful salesmen endeavor to keep away from the discussion of subjects that may arouse the buyer's chain of doubt impressions which he has stored away by reason of previous experiences. The successful salesman quickly learns that knocking a competitor or a competing article may result in bringing to the buyer's mind certain negative emotions growing out of previous experiences which may make it impossible for the salesman to neutralize the buyer's mind. This principle applies to and controls every sense impression that is lodged in the human mind. Take the feeling of fear, for example. The moment we permit a single emotion that is related to fear to reach the conscious mind, it calls with it all of its unsavory relations. A feeling of courage cannot claim the attention of the conscious mind while a feeling of fear. -36. One's there. One or the other must dominate. They make poor roommates because they do not harmonize in nature. Like attracts like. Every thought held in the conscious mind has a tendency to draw to it other thoughts of a similar nature. You see, therefore, that these feelings, thoughts, and emotions growing out of past experiences, which claim the attention of the conscious mind, are backed by a regular army of supporting soldiers of a similar nature, that stand ready to aid them in their work. Deliberately place in your own mind, through the principle of autosuggestion, the ambition to succeed through the aid of a definite chief aim, and notice how quickly all of your latent or undeveloped ability in the nature of past experiences will become stimulated and aroused to action in your behalf. Plant in a boy's mind, through the principle of suggestion, the ambition to become a successful lawyer or doctor or engineer or businessman or financier, and if you plant that suggestion deeply enough, and keep it there, by repetition, it will begin to move that boy toward the achievement of the object of that ambition. If you would plant a suggestion deeply, mix it generously with enthusiasm, for enthusiasm is the fertilizer that will ensure its rapid growth as well as its permanency. When that kind-hearted old gentleman planted in my mind the suggestion that I was a bright boy and that I could make my mark in the world if I would educate myself, it was not so much what he said, as it was the way in which he said it that made such a deep and lasting impression on my mind. It was the way in which he gripped my shoulders and the look of con. 37. Confidence in his eyes that drove his suggestion so deeply into my subconscious mind that it never gave me any peace until I commenced taking the steps that led to the fulfillment of the suggestion. This is a point that I would stress with all the power at my command. It is not so much what you say as it is the tone and manner in which you say it that makes a lasting impression. It naturally follows, therefore, that sincerity of purpose, honesty, and earnestness must be placed back of all that one says if one would make a lasting and favorable impression. Whatever you successfully sell to others you must first sell to yourself. Not long ago I was approached by an agent of the government of Mexico who sought my services as a writer of propaganda for the administration in charge at that time. His approach was about as follows. Whereas, Sapphire has a reputation as an exponent of the Golden Rule philosophy, and whereas, Sapphire is known throughout the United States as an independent who is not allied with any political faction, now, therefore, would Sapphire be gracious enough to come to Mexico, study the economic and political affairs of that country, then return to the United States and write a series of articles to appear in the newspapers, recommending to the people of America the immediate recognition of Mexico by the government of the United States, etc. For this service, I was offered more money than I shall, perhaps, ever possess during my entire life, but I refused the commission, and for a reason that will fail to impress anyone except those who understand. -38. The principle which makes it necessary for all who would influence others to remain on good terms with their own conscience. I could not write convincingly of Mexico's cause for the reason that I did not believe in that cause, therefore, I could not have mixed sufficient enthusiasm with my writing to have made it effective, even though I had been willing to prostitute my talent and dip my pen into ink that I knew to be muddy. I will not endeavor further to explain my philosophy on this incident for the reason that those who are far enough advanced in the study of autosuggestion will not need further explanation, while those who are not far enough advanced would not and could not understand. No man can afford to express, through words or acts, that which is not in harmony with his own belief, and if he does so he must pay by the loss of his ability to influence others. Please read, aloud, the foregoing paragraph. It is worth emphasizing by repetition, for lack of observation of the principle upon which it is based constitutes the rocks and reefs upon which many a man est definite chief aim-es et 1 f to pieces. I do not believe that I can afford to try to deceive anyone, about anything, but I know that I cannot afford to try to deceive myself. To do so would destroy the power of my pen and render my words ineffective. It is only when I write with the fire of enthusiasm burning in my heart that my writing impresses others favorably, and it is only when I speak from a heart that is bursting with belief in my message, that I can move my audience to accept that message. -39. Is there not food for thought in the fact that no newspaper has ever published any account of wild drinking parties or other similar scandals in connection with the names of Edison, Ford, Rockefeller, and most of the other really big fellows? -40. I would also have you read, aloud, the foregoing paragraph. Yes, I would have you commit it to memory. Even more than this, I would have you write it out and place it where it may serve as a daily reminder of a principle, nay, a law as immutable as the law of gravitation, without which you can never become a power in your chosen life work. There have been times, and many of them, when it appeared that if I stood by this principle it would mean starvation. There have been times when my closest friends and business advisors have strongly urged me to shade my philosophy for the sake of gaining a needed advantage here and there, but somehow I have managed to cling to it, mainly, I suppose, for the reason that I have preferred peace and harmony in my own heart to the material gain that I might have had by a forced compromise with my conscience. Strange as it may seem, my deliberations and conclusions on this subject of refusing to strangle my own conscience have seldom been based upon what is commonly called honesty. That which I have done in the matter of refraining from writing or speaking anything that I did not believe has been solely a question of honor between my conscience and myself. I have tried to express that which my heart dictated because I have aimed to give my words flesh. It might be said that my motive was based more upon self-interest than it was on a desire to be fair with others, although I have never desired to be unfair with others, so far as I am able to analyze myself. No man can become a master salesman if he compromises with falsehood. Murder will out, and -41. Even though no one ever catches him red-handed in expressing that which he does not believe, his words will fail in the accomplishment of their purpose because he cannot give them flesh, if they do not come from his heart, and if they are not mixed with genuine, unadulterated enthusiasm. I would also have you read, aloud, the foregoing paragraph, for it embraces a great law that you must understand and apply before you can become a person of influence in any undertaking. In making these requests, for the sake of emphasis, I am not trying to take undue liberties with you. I am giving you full credit for being an adult, a thinker, an intelligent person, yet I know how likely you are to skip over these vital laws without being sufficiently impressed by them to make them a part of your own workaday philosophy. I know your weakness because I know my own. It has required the better part of 25 years of ups and downs, mostly downs, to impress these basic truths upon my own mind so that they influenced me. I have tried both them and their opposites, therefore, I can speak, not as one who merely believes in their soundness, but as one who knows. And what do I mean by these truths? So that you cannot possibly misunderstand my meaning, and so that these words of warning cannot possibly convey an abstract meaning, I will state that by these truths I mean this. You cannot afford to suggest to another person, by word of mouth or by an act of yours, that which you do not believe. Surely that is plain enough. -42. And, the reason you cannot afford to do so, one's this. If you compromise with your own conscience, it will not be long before you will have no conscience, for your conscience will fail to guide you, just as an alarm clock will fail to awaken you if you do not heed it. Surely, that is plain enough, also. And how do I happen to be an authority on this vital subject, do you ask? I am an authority because I have experimented with the principle until I know how it works. But, you may ask, how do I know that you are telling the truth? The answer is that you will know only by experimenting for yourself, and by observing others who faithfully apply this principle and those who do not apply it. If my evidence needs backing, then consult any man whom you know to be a person who has tried to get by without observing this principle, and if he will not or cannot give you the truth, you can get it, nevertheless, by analyzing the man. There is but one thing in the world that gives a man real and enduring power, and that is character. Reputation, bear in mind, is not character. Reputation is that which people are believed to be, character is that which people are. If you would be a person of great influence, then be a person of real character. Character is the philosopher's lodestone through which all who have it may turn the base metals of their life into pure gold. Without character you have nothing, you are nothing, and you can be nothing, except a pile of flesh and bone and hair, worth perhaps $25. Character is something. -43. That you cannot beg or steal or buy. You can get it only by building it, and you can build it by your own thoughts and deeds, and in no other way. Through the aid of autosuggestion, any person can build a sound character, no matter what his past has been. As a fitting close for this lesson, I wish to emphasize the fact that all who have character have enthusiasm and personality sufficient to draw to them others who have character. You will now be instructed as to how you shall proceed in developing enthusiasm, in the event that you do not already possess this rare quality. The instructions will be simple, but you will be unfortunate if you discount their value on that account. First, complete the remaining lessons of this course, because other important instructions which are to be coordinated with this one will be found in subsequent lessons. Second, if you have not already done so, write out your definite chief aim in clear, simple language, and follow this by writing out the plan through which you intend to transform your aim into reality. Third, read over the description of your definite chief aim each night, just before retiring, and as you read, see yourself, in your imagination, in full possession of the object of your aim. Do this with full faith in your ability to transform your definite chief aim into reality. Read aloud, with all the enthusiasm at your command, emphasizing every word. Repeat this reading until the small still voice within you tells you that your purpose will be realized. Sometimes you will feel the effects of this voice from within the first. -44. Time you read your definite chief aim, while at other times, you may have to read it a dozen or 50 times before the assurance comes, but do not stop until you feel it. If you prefer to do so, you may read your definite chief aim as a prayer. The remainder of this lesson is for the person who has not yet learned the power of faith and who knows little or nothing of the principle of autosuggestion. To all who are in this class, I would recommend the reading of the 7th and 8th verses of the 7th chapter, and the 20th verse of the 17th chapter of St. Matthew. One of the greatest powers for good, upon the face of this earth, is faith. To this marvelous power may be traced miracles of the most astounding nature. It offers peace on earth to all who embrace it. Faith involves a principle that is so far-reaching in its effect that no man can say what are its limitations, or if it has limitations. Write into the description of your definite chief aim a statement of the qualities that you intend to develop in yourself, and the station in life that you intend to attain, and have faith, as you read this description each night, that you can transform this purpose into reality. Surely, you cannot miss the suggestion contained in this lesson. To become successful you must be a person of action. Merely to know is not sufficient. It is necessary both to know and do. Enthusiasm is the mainspring of the mind which urges one to put knowledge into action. Billy Sunday is the most successful evangelist this country has ever known. For the purpose of study. 45. If you think your lot in life has been hard, read Up from Slavery by Booker T. Washington, and you may see how fortunate you have been. -46. 1. His technique in checking up on his psychological methods. The author of this course went through 3 campaigns with Reverend Sunday. His success is based very largely upon one word: enthusiasm. By making effective use of the law of suggestion, Billy Sunday conveys his own spirit of enthusiasm to the minds of his followers and they become influenced by it. He sells his sermons by the use of exactly the same sort of strategy employed by many master salesmen. Enthusiasm is as essential to a salesman as water is to a duck. All successful sales managers understand the psychology of enthusiasm and make use of it, in various ways, as a practical means of helping their men produce more sales. Practically all sales organizations have get-together meetings at stated times, for the purpose of revitalizing the minds of all members of the sales force, and injecting the spirit of enthusiasm, which can be best done en masse, through group psychology. Sales meetings might properly be called revival meetings, because their purpose is to revive interest and arouse enthusiasm which will enable the salesman to take up the fight with renewed ambition and energy. During his administration as sales manager of the National Cash Register Company, Hugh Chalmers, who later became famous in the motor car industry, faced a most embarrassing situation which threatened to wipe out his position as well as that of thousands of salesmen under his direction. The company was in financial difficulty. This fact, -47, had become known to the salesmen in the field, and the effect of it was to cause them to lose their enthusiasm. Sales began to dwindle until finally the conditions became so alarming that a general meeting of the sales organization was called, to be held at the company's plant in Dayton, Ohio. Salesmen were called in from all over the country. Mr. Chalmers presided over the meeting. He began by calling on several of his best salesmen to get on their feet and tell what was wrong out in the field, that orders had fallen off. One by one they got up, as called, and each man had a most terrible tale of grief to unfold. Business conditions were bad, money was scarce, people were holding off buying until after presidential election, etc. As the fifth man began to enumerate the difficulties which had kept him from making his usual quota of sales, Mr. Chalmers jumped up on top of a table, held up his hands for silence, and said, "Stop. I order this convention to come to a close for 10 minutes while I get my shoes shined." Then turning to a small colored boy who sat nearby, he ordered the boy to bring his shoe shine outfit and shine his shoes, right where he stood, on top of the table. The salesmen in the audience were astounded. Some of them thought that Mr. Chalmers had suddenly lost his mind. They began to whisper among themselves. Meanwhile, the little colored boy shined first one and then the other shoe, taking plenty of time and doing a first-class job. After the job was finished, Mr. Chalmers handed the boy a dime, then went ahead with his speech. I want each of you, said he, to take a good -48. Look at this little colored boy. He has the concession for shoe shining throughout our plant and offices. His predecessor was a white boy, considerably older than himself, and despite the fact that the company subsidized him with a salary of $5.00 a week, he could not make a living in this plant, where thousands of people are employed. This little colored boy not only makes a good living, without any subsidy from the company, but he is actually saving money out of his earnings each week, working under the same conditions, in the same plant, for the same people. Now I wish to ask you a question: whose fault was it that the white boy did not get more business? Was it his fault, or the fault of his buyers? In a mighty roar from the crowd the answer came back. It was the boy's fault, of course. Just so, replied Chalmers, and now I want to tell you this, that you are selling cash registers in the same territory, to the same people, with exactly the same business conditions that existed a year ago, yet you are not producing the business that you were then. Now whose fault is that? Is it yours, or the buyer's? And again the answer came back with a roar. It is our fault, of course. I am glad that you are frank to acknowledge your faults, Chalmers continued, and I now wish to tell you what your trouble is. You have heard rumors about this company being in financial trouble, and that has killed off your enthusiasm so that you are not making the effort that you formerly made. If you will. -49. Go back into your territories with a definite promise to send in 5 orders each during the next 30 days. This company will no longer be in financial difficulty, for that additional business will see us clear. Will you do it? They said they would, and they did. That incident has gone down in the history of the National Cash Register Company under the name of Hugh Chalmers' $1 million shoe shine, for it is said that this turned the tide in the company's affairs and was worth millions of dollars. Enthusiasm knows no defeat. The sales manager who knows how to send out an army of enthusiastic salespeople may set his own price on his services, and what is more important even than this, he can increase the earning capacity of every person under his direction. Thus, his enthusiasm benefits not only himself but perhaps hundreds of others. Enthusiasm is never a matter of chance. There are certain stimuli which produce enthusiasm, the important of these being as follows: 1. Occupation in work which one loves best. 2. Environment where one comes in contact most with others who are enthusiastic and optimistic. 3. Financial success. 4. Complete mastery and application, in one's daily work, of the 15 laws of success. 5. Good health. 6. Knowledge that one has served others in some helpful manner. 7. Good clothes, appropriate to the needs of one's occupation. All of these 7 sources of stimuli are self-50. Explanatory with the exception of the last. The psychology of clothes is understood by very few people, and for this reason it will be here explained in detail. Clothes constitute the most important part of the embellishment which every person must have in order to feel self-reliant, hopeful, and enthusiastic. The psychology of good clothes. When the good news came from the theater of war, on November the 11th, 1918, my worldly possessions amounted to but little more than they did the day I came into the world. The war had destroyed my business and made it necessary for me to make a new start. My wardrobe consisted of 3 well-worn business suits and 2 uniforms which I no longer needed. Knowing all too well that the world forms its first and most lasting impressions of a man by the clothes he wears, I lost no time in visiting my tailor. Happily, my tailor had known me for many years, therefore he did not judge me entirely by the clothes I wore. If he had, I would have been sunk. With less than $1 in change in my pocket, I picked out the cloth for 3 of the most expensive suits I ever owned, and ordered that they be made up for me at once. The 3 suits came to $3.7500. I shall never forget the remark made by the tailor, as he took my measure. Glancing first at the 3 bolts of expensive cloth which I had selected, and then at me, he inquired, $a year man, at -51. All anyone really requires, as a capital on which to start a successful career, is a sound mind, a healthy body and a genuine desire to be of as much service as possible to as many people as possible. -52. No, said I, if I had been fortunate enough to get on the $a year payroll I might now have enough money to pay for these suits. The tailor looked at me with surprise. I don't think he got the joke. One of the suits was a beautiful dark gray, one was a dark blue, the other was a light blue with a pinstripe. Fortunately I was in good standing with my tailor, therefore he did not ask when I was going to pay for those expensive suits. I knew that I could and would pay for them in due time, but could I have convinced him of that? This was the thought which was running through my mind, with hope against hope that the question would not be brought up. I then visited my haberdasher, from whom I purchased 3 less expensive suits and a complete supply of the best shirts, collars, ties, hosiery and underwear that he carried. My bill at the haberdasher's amounted to a little over $300. With an air of prosperity I nonchalantly signed the charge ticket and tossed it back to the salesman, with instructions to deliver my purchase the following morning. The feeling of renewed self-reliance and success had begun to come over me, even before I had attired myself in my newly purchased outfit. I was out of the war and $675 in debt, all in less than 24 hours. The following day the first of the 3 suits ordered from the haberdasher was delivered. I put it on at once, stuffed a new silk handkerchief in the out. 53. Side pocket of my coat, shoved the $50 I had borrowed on my ring down into my pants pocket, and walked down Michigan Boulevard, in Chicago, feeling as rich as Rockefeller. Every article of clothing I wore, from my underwear out, was of the very best. That it was not paid for was nobody's business except mine and my tailor's and my haberdasher's. Every morning I dressed myself in an entirely new outfit, and walked down the same street, at precisely the same hour. That hour happened to be the time when a certain wealthy publisher usually walked down the same street, on his way to lunch. I made it my business to speak to him each day, and occasionally I would stop for a minute's chat with him. After this daily meeting had been going on for about a week I met this publisher one day, but decided I would see if he would let me get by without speaking. Watching him from under my eyelashes I looked straight ahead, and started to pass him when he stopped and motioned me over to the edge of the sidewalk, placed his hand on my shoulder, looked me over from head to foot, and said, "You look damn prosperous for a man who has just laid aside a uniform. Who makes your clothes?" "Well," said I, "Wilkie and Celery made this particular suit." He then wanted to know what sort of business I was engaged in. That airy atmosphere of prosperity which I had been wearing, along with a new and different suit every day, had got the better of his curiosity. I had hoped that it would. -54. Flipping the ashes from my Havana Perfecta, said, "Oh, I am preparing the copy for a new magazine that I am going to publish." "A new magazine, eh?" he queried, "and what are you going to call it?" "It is to be named Hill's Golden Rule." "Don't forget," said my publisher friend, "that I am in the business of printing and distributing magazines. Perhaps I can serve you, also." That was the moment for which I had been waiting. I had that very moment, and almost the very spot of ground on which we stood, in mind when I was purchasing those new suits. But, is it necessary to remind you, that conversation never would have taken place had this publisher observed me walking down that street from day to day, with a whipdog look on my face, an unpressed suit on my back and a look of poverty in my eyes. An appearance of prosperity attracts attention always, with no exceptions whatsoever. Moreover, a look of prosperity attracts favorable attention, because the one do one need a thing desire one and every human heart is to be prosperous. My publisher friend invited me to his club for lunch. Before the coffee and cigars had been served he had talked me out of the contract for printing and distributing my magazine. I had even consented to permit him to supply the capital, without any interest charge. For the benefit of those who are not familiar with -55. The publishing business, may I not offer the information that considerable capital is required for launching a new nationally distributed magazine. Capital, in such large amounts, is often hard to get, even with the best of security. The capital necessary for launching Hill's Golden Rule magazine, which you may have read, was well above $30,000, and every cent of it was raised on a front created mostly by good clothes. True, there may have been some ability back of those clothes, but many millions of men have ability who never have anything else, and who are never heard of outside of the limited community in which they live. This is a rather sad truth. To some it may seem an unpardonable extravagance for one who was broke to have gone in debt for $675 worth of clothes, but the psychology back of that investment more than justified it. The appearance of prosperity not only made a favorable impression on those to whom I had to look for favors, but of more importance still was the effect that proper attire had on me. I not only knew that correct clothes would impress others favorably, but I knew also that good clothes would give me an atmosphere of self-reliance, without which I could not hope to regain my lost fortunes. I got my first training in the psychology of good clothes from my friend Edwin C. Barnes, who is a close business associate of Thomas A. Edison. Barnes afforded considerable amusement for the Edison staff when, some 20-odd years ago, he rode into West Orange on a freight train, not being able to raise Suv. 56. Sufficient money for passenger fare, and announced at the Edison offices that he had come to enter into a partnership with Mr. Edison. Nearly everybody around the Edison plant laughed at Barnes, except Edison himself. He saw something in the square jaw and determined face of young Barnes which most of the others did not see, despite the fact that the young man looked more like a tramp than he did a future partner of the greatest inventor on earth. Barnes got his start, sweeping floors in the Edison offices. That was all he sought, just a chance to get a toehold in the Edison organization. From there on he made history that is well worth emulation by other young men who wish to make places for themselves. Barnes has now retired from active business, even though he is still a comparatively young man, and spends most of his time at his two beautiful homes in Bradentown, Florida, and Damariscotta, Maine. He is a multimillionaire, prosperous and happy. I first became acquainted with Barnes during the early days of his association with Edison, before he had arrived. In those days he had the largest and most expensive collection of clothes I had ever seen or heard of one man owning. His wardrobe consisted of 31 suits, one for each day of the month. He never wore the same suit 2 days in succession. Moreover, all his suits were of the most expensive type. Incidentally, his clothes were made by the same tailors who made those 3 suits for me. He wore socks which cost $6 per pair. -57. There is a suitable reward for every virtue and appropriate punishment for every sin a man commits. Both the reward and the punishment are effects over which no man has control, as they come upon him voluntarily. -58. His shirts and other wearing apparel cost in similar proportion. His cravats were specially made, at a cost of from $5 to $7.50 each. One day, in a spirit of fun, I asked him to save some of his old suits which he did not need, for me. He informed me that he hadn't a single suit which he did not need. He then gave me a lesson on the psychology of clothes which is well worth remembering. "I do not wear 31 suits of clothes," said he, "entirely for the impression they make on other people, I do it mostly for the impression they have on me." Barnes then told me of the day when he presented himself at the Edison plant, for a position. He said he had to walk around the plant a dozen times before he worked up enough courage to announce himself, because he knew that he looked more like a tramp than he did a desirable employee. Barnes is said to be the most able salesman ever connected with the great inventor of West Orange. His entire fortune was made through his ability as a salesman, but he has often said that he never could have accomplished the results which have made him both wealthy and famous had it not been for his understanding of the psychology of clothes. I have met many salesmen in my time. During the past 10 years I have personally trained and directed the efforts of more than 3,000 salespeople, both men and women, and I have observed that, without a single exception, the star producers were all people who -59. Understood and made good use of the psychology of clothes. I have seen a few well-dressed people who made no outstanding records as salesmen, but I have yet to see the first poorly dressed man who became a star producer in the field of selling. I have studied the psychology of clothes for so long, and I have watched its effect on people in so many different walks of life, that I am fully convinced there is a close connection between clothes and success. Personally I feel no need of 31 suits of clothes, but if my personality demanded a wardrobe of this size I would manage to get it, no matter how one look at it might cost. To be well dressed a man should have at least 10 suits of clothes. He should have a different suit for each of the 7 days of the week, a full dress suit and a tuxedo, for formal evening occasions, and a cutaway for formal afternoon occasions. For summer wear he should have an assortment of at least 4 appropriate light suits, with blue coat and white flannel trousers for informal afternoon and evening occasions. If he plays golf he should have at least 1 golf suit. This, of course, is for the man who is a notch or 2 above the mediocre class. The man who once satisfied with mediocrity needs but few clothes. It may be true, as a well-known poet has said, that clothes do not make the man, but no one can deny the fact that good clothes go a very long way toward giving him a favorable start. -60. A man's bank will generally loan him all the money he wants when he does not need it when he is prosperous, but never go to your bank for a loan with a shabby-looking suit on your back and a look of poverty in your eyes, for if you do you'll get the gate. Success attracts success. There is no escape from this great universal law, therefore, if you wish to attract success make sure that you look the part of success, whether your calling is that of day laborer or merchant prince. For the benefit of the more dignified students of this philosophy who may object to resorting to stunt stimuli or trick clothing as a means of achieving success, it may be profitably explained that practically every successful man on earth has discovered some form of stimulus through which he can and does drive himself onto greater effort. It may be shocking to members of the Anti-Saloon League, but it is said to be true, nevertheless, that James Whitcomb Riley wrote his best poems when he was under the influence of alcohol. His stimulus was liquor. The author wishes it distinctly understood that he does not recommend the use of alcoholic or narcotic stimuli, for any purpose whatsoever, as either will eventually destroy both body and mind of all who use them. Under the influence of alcohol, Riley became imaginative, enthusiastic, and an entirely different person, according to close personal friends of his. Edwin Barnes spurred himself into the necessary action to produce outstanding results, with the aid of good clothes. Some men rise to great heights of achievement as -61. The result of love for some woman. Connect this with the brief suggestion to the subject which was made in the introductory lesson, and you will, if you are a person who knows the ways of men, be able to finish the discussion of this particular phase of enthusiasm stimulus without further comment by the author, which might not be appropriate for the younger minds that will assimilate this philosophy. Underworld characters who are engaged in the dangerous business of highway robbery, burglary, etc., generally dope themselves for the occasion of their operations, with cocaine, morphine and other narcotics. Even in this there is a lesson which shows that practically all men need temporary or artificial stimuli to drive them to greater effort than that normally employed in the ordinary pursuits of life. Successful people have discovered ways and means which they believe best suited to their own needs, to produce stimuli which cause them to rise to heights of endeavor above the ordinary. One of the most successful writers in the world employs an orchestra of beautifully dressed young women who play for him while he writes. Seated in a room that has been artistically decorated to suit his own taste, under lights that have been colored, tinted, and softened, these beautiful young ladies, dressed in handsome evening gowns, play his favorite music. To use his own words, I become drunk with enthusiasm, under the influence of this environment, and rise to heights I never know or feel on other occasions. It is then that I do my work. The thoughts pour in on -62. Me as if they were dictated by an unseen and unknown power. This author gets much of his inspiration from music and art. Once a week he spends at least an hour in an art museum, looking at the works of the masters. On these occasions, again using his own words, I get enough enthusiasm from 1 hour's visit in the Museum of Art to carry me for 2 days. Edgar Allan Poe wrote The Raven when, it is reported, he was more than half intoxicated. Oscar Wilde wrote his poems under the influence of a form of stimulus which cannot be appropriately mentioned in a course of this nature. Henry Ford, so it is believed by this author, who admits that this is merely the author's opinion, got his real start as the result of his love for his charming life companion. It was she who inspired him, gave him faith in high one and self, and kept him keyed up so that he carried on in the face of adversities which would have killed off a dozen ordinary men. These incidents are cited as evidence that men of outstanding achievement have, by accident or design, discovered ways and means of stimulating themselves to a high state of enthusiasm. Associate that which has been here stated with what was said concerning the law of the mastermind, in the introductory lesson, and you will have an entirely new conception of the modus operandi through which that law may be applied. You will also have a somewhat different understanding of the real purpose of allied effort, in a spirit of perfect harmony, which constitutes the best known method of bringing into use the law of the mastermind. -63. Your employer does not control the sort of service you render. You control that, and it is the thing that makes or breaks you. Fr. At this point it seems appropriate to call your attention to the manner in which the lessons of this course blend. You will observe that each lesson covers the subject intended to be covered, and in addition to this it overlaps and gives the student a better understanding of some other lesson or lessons of the course. In the light of what has been said in this lesson, for example, the student will better understand the real purpose of the law of the mastermind, that purpose being, in the main, a practical method of stimulating the minds of all who participate in the group constituting the mastermind. Times too numerous to be here described, this author has gone into conference with men whose faces showed the signs of care, who had the appearance of worry written all over them, only to see those same men straighten up their shoulders, tilt their chins at a higher angle, soften their faces with smiles of confidence, and get down to business with that sort of enthusiasm which knows no defeat. The change took place the moment harmony of purpose was established. If a man goes about the affairs of life in the same day in and day out, prosaic, lackadaisical spirit, devoid of enthusiasm, he is doomed to failure. Nothing can save him until he changes his attitude and learns how to stimulate his mind and body to unusual heights of enthusiasm at will. The author is unwilling to leave the subject without having stated the principle here described in so many different ways that it is bound to be understood and also respected by the students of this -65 course, who, all will remember, are men and women of all sorts of natures, experiences, and degrees of intelligence. For this reason much repetition once essential. Your business in life, you are reminded once again, is to achieve success. With the stimulus you will experience from studying this philosophy, and with the aid of the ideas you will gather from it, plus the personal cooperation of the author who will give you an accurate inventory of your outstanding qualities, you should be able to create a definite plan that will lift you to great heights of achievement. However, there is no plan that can produce this desirable result without the aid asterisk of some influence that will cause you to arouse yourself, in a spirit of enthusiasm, to where you will exert greater than the ordinary effort which you put into your daily occupation. You are now ready for the lesson on self-control. As you read that lesson you will observe that it has a vital bearing on this lesson, just as this lesson has a direct connection with the preceding lessons on a definite chief aim, self-confidence, initiative and leadership and imagination. The next lesson describes the law which serves as the balance wheel of this entire philosophy. -66. The 7 deadly horsemen. And after the lesson visit with the author. The 7 horsemen are labeled, in order shown, intolerance, greed, revenge, egotism, suspicion, jealousy and the worst enemy that any man has is the one that walks around under his own hat. If you could see yourself as others see you, the enemies that you harbor in your own personality might be discovered and thrown out. The 7 enemies named in this essay are the commonest which ride millions of men and women to failure without being discovered. Weigh yourself carefully and find out how many of the 7 you are harboring. You see, in this picture, 7 deadly warriors. From birth until death every human being must give battle to these enemies. Your success will be measured very largely by the way you manage your battle against these swift riders. As you look at this picture you will say, of -67 course, that it is only imagination. True, the picture is imaginary, but the swift riders of destruction are real. If these enemies rode openly, on real horses, they would not be dangerous, because they could be rounded up and put out of commission. But, they ride unseen, in the minds of men. So silently and subtly do they work that most people never recognize their presence. Take inventory of yourself and find out how many of these 7 horsemen you are harboring. In the foreground you will find the most dangerous and the commonest of the riders. You will be fortunate if you discover this enemy and protect yourself against it. This cruel warrior, intolerance, has killed more people, destroyed more friendships, brought more misery and suffering into the world and caused more wars than all of the other 6 horsemen that you see in this picture. Until you master intolerance, you will never become an accurate thinker. This enemy of mankind closes up the mind and pushes reason and logic and facts into the background. If you find yourself hating those whose religious viewpoint is different from your own, you may be sure that the most dangerous of the 7 deadly horsemen still rides in your brain. Next, in the picture, you will observe revenge and greed. These riders travel side by side. Where one is found, the other is always close at hand. Greed warps. -68. And twists man's brain so that he wants to build a fence around the earth and keep everyone else on the outside of it. This is the enemy that drives man to accumulate millions upon top of millions of dollars which he does not need and can never use. This is the enemy that causes man to twist the screw until he has wrung the last drop of blood from his fellow man. And, thanks to revenge which rides alongside of greed, the unfortunate person who gives brain room to these cruel twins is not satisfied to merely take away his fellow man's earthly belongings, he wants to destroy his reputation in the bargain. Revenge is a naked sword, it has neither hilt nor guard. Wouldst thou wield this brand of the Lord, is thy grasp then firm and hard? But the closer thy clutch of the blade, the deadlier blow thou wouldst deal, deeper wound in thy hand is made it. Is thy blood reddens the steel. And when thou hast dealt the blow, when the blade from thy hand has flown instead of the heart of the foe, thou mayst find it sheathed in thine own. If you would know how deadly are envy and greed, study the history of every man who has set out to become ruler of this world. If you do not wish to undertake so ambitious a program of research, then study the people around you, those who have tried and those who are now. -69. Trying to feather their own nests at the cost of others. Greed and revenge stand at the crossroads of life, where they turn aside to failure and misery every person who would take the road that leads to success. It is a part of your business not to permit them to interfere with you when you approach one of these crossroads. Both individuals and nations rapidly decline where greed and envy ride in the minds of those who dominate. Take a look at Mexico and Spain if you wish to know what happens to the envious and the greedy. Most important of all, take a look at yourself and make sure that these 2 deadly enemies are not riding in your brain. Turn your attention, now, to 2 more twins of destruction, egotism and suspicion. Observe that they, also, ride side by side. There is no hope of success for the person who suffers either from too much self-love or lack of confidence in others. Someone who likes to manipulate figures has estimated that the largest club in the world is the It Can't Be Done Club. It is claimed that there are approximately 99 million members of this club in the United States of America alone. If you have no faith in other people, you have not the seed of success in you. Suspicion is a prolific germ. If permitted to get a start, it rapidly multiplies itself until it leaves no room for faith. Without faith, no man may enjoy enduring success. Running, like a golden cord of illumination. -70. Throughout the Bible, is the admonition to have faith. Before civilization lost itself in its mad rush for dollars, men understood the power of faith. For verily I say unto you, if ye have faith as a grain of mustard seed, ye shall say unto this mountain, remove hence to yonder place, and it shall remove, and nothing shall be impossible unto you. The writer of this passage, which appears in the Bible, understood a great law which but few of today understand. Believe in people if you would have them believe in you. Kill off suspicion. If you do not, it will kill you off. If you would have power, cultivate faith in mankind. Egotism thrives where suspicion exists. Interest yourself in others and you will be too busy to indulge in self-love. Observe those around you who begin every sentence with the personal pronoun, I, and you will notice that they are suspicious of other people. The man who can forget himself while engaging in useful service to other people is never cursed with suspicion. Study those about you who are both suspicious and egotistical and see how many of this type you can name who are successful in whatever work they may be engaged in. And, while making the study of others, study, also, yourself. Be sure that you are not bound down by egotism and suspicion. Bringing up the rear of this deadly group of riders you see 2 horsemen, one is jealousy and the -71. Name of the other has been purposely omitted. Each reader of this article may take inventory of himself and give the 7th rider a name that fits whatever he finds in his own mind. Some will name this rider dishonesty. Others will name it procrastination. A few will have the courage to name it uncontrolled sex desire. As for you, name it whatever you please, but be sure to give it a name. Perhaps your own imagination will supply an appropriate name as a fellow traveler for jealousy. You will be better prepared to give the unnamed rider a name if you know that jealousy is a form of insanity. Facts are sometimes cruel things to face. It is a fact that jealousy is a form of insanity, known to the medical fraternity as dementia praecox. O jealousy, thou ugliest fiend of hell. Thy deadly venom preys on my vitals, turns the healthful hue of my fresh cheek to haggard sallowness, and drinks my spirit up. You will notice that jealousy rides just back of suspicion. Some who read this will say that jealousy and suspicion should have ridden side by side, as one often leads to the other in man's mind. Jealousy is the most common form of insanity. It rides in the minds of both men and women, sometimes with a real cause, but more often without any cause whatsoever. This deadly rider is a great friend of the divorce. -72. Lawyers. It also keeps detective agencies busy night and day. It takes its regular toll of murder. It breaks up homes and makes widows of mothers and orphans of innocent little children. Peace and happiness can never be yours as long as this rider remains unharnessed in your brain. Man and wife may go through life together in poverty and still be very happy, if both are free from this child of insanity known as jealousy. Examine yourself carefully, and if you find any evidence of jealousy in your mind, begin, at once, to master it. Jealousy rides in many forms. When it first begins to creep into the brain, it manifests itself in something after this fashion: I wonder where she is and what she is doing while I am away. Or, I wonder if he does not see another woman when he is away from me. When these questions begin to arise in your mind, do not call in a detective. Instead, go to the psychopathic hospital and have yourself examined, because more than likely you are suffering from a mild form of insanity. Get your foot on jealousy's neck before it gets its clutches on your throat. After you have read this essay, lay it aside and think about it. At first you may say, this does not apply to me. I have no imaginary horseman in my brain. And, you may be right, 1 out of every 10 million could say this and be right. The other 9,999,009. -73. 199 would be wrong. Do not fool yourself. You may be in that larger class. The purpose of this article is to get you to see yourself as you are. If you are suffering failure and poverty and misery in any of their forms, you are sure to discover one or more of these deadly riders in your brain. Make no mistake about it, those who have all they want, including happiness and good health, have driven the 7 horsemen out of their brains. Come back to this essay a month from now, after you have had time to analyze yourself carefully. Read it again and it may bring you face to face with facts that will emancipate you from a horde of cruel enemies that now ride within your brain without your knowing it. This has been a production by the Mental Chemist, for study and education. Copyright 2024.